Hello class, I'm Jason Kellam, and today I'll be taking you through my equipment repair facility workflow project. The reason I chose this project is because it was a project that I was a part of. I sat in what would have been the role of the project management over this, project manager. However, we didn't manage this in terms of how project management would view it. Therefore, I really wanted to take an opportunity to compare this to project management guidelines and kind of see how it fared out, and if we were actually able to incorporate, without knowing it, many of the project management guidelines. A little bit of abstract on this. I'm an electronics maintenance officer in the United States Marine Corps, and I currently work at a repair facility in charge of about 130 Marines, responsible for repairing electronics for a communications battalion in the Marine Corps. About a year ago in our shop, I noticed that there was a lot of resources that could have been better managed, wasted resources. There was also a good bit of misinformation that led to duplication of efforts, therefore wasting the time of personnel within the repair facility. There were some dated policies that required every component of a system to come into the maintenance section, even if it wasn't necessary to repair those items. And there was also limited space within the repair facility that was getting full and making it hard to account for equipment while it was within the repair facility. This all led to a lot of confusion between the equipment owners and the maintenance department and what was the current status of their equipment, and therefore we wanted to try to increase productivity while also being better with our communications of statuses. So we ultimately decided that we needed to choose a project that would prevent the wasted resources. It could improve the communication between the maintainers and the equipment owners, and it would establish a baseline accountability within the repair sections and better organize them to maintain accountability without expending a lot of personnel time. Ultimately, this is all to turn around and improve that maintenance time, returning the repaired equipment to the equipment owner in as fast a time as possible. So we went into our project selection phase. We actually used the comparative benefit model. We took 3 courses of action and drew them up on the board, and then did comparison between the benefits of each one. One of those would have been to leave the structure, personnel and equipment, all where it was in place, but revise some of those policies that required too much of the equipment to come into the repair facility. The second course of action would take the shipping and receiving section, S&R, and it would leave it there, but it would take the personnel away from it, reduce it down, and then when those individual repair sections had equipment that came in for maintenance, they would go to the shipping and receiving section, induct the piece of equipment, and then take it back to their section. And then the third course of action that was proposed, which was ultimately the one that was the project that we went with, was to reduce the S&R down to where they only handled parts and shipping and receiving for the execution of maintenance to repair the items that were in the facility, as well as they are responsible for maintaining the test measurement equipment and the tools that are used within the repair facility. In choosing that project, we appointed personnel to be the lead for supply and requisitioning shelving and other materials that were needed to better organize the facility. There was personnel assigned to being the lead for equipment redistribution, taking the equipment that was in the shipping and receiving section and distributing it back to the appropriate sections. Personnel, there was a lead assigned to the personnel redistribution, ensuring that the S&R footprint that was going to be reduced drastically, those personnel would go back to individual repair sections in order to better enhance them and conduct the induction of equipment at the individual section. And then the final part of this is, while we were going ahead and doing a project, we were going to account for all the works in process, all the WIPs that were currently in, and there were 3 repair sections within this facility, and so we assigned each manager of a section to facilitate that. So in the activity planning, the overview was we proposed to hire to take a 1-week freeze in maintenance, to where we wouldn't induct anything new into the maintenance cycle, and we wouldn't put anything out of the maintenance cycle unless it was considered something priority. So the goals that were proposed to hire is that we would reorganize personnel and equipment, account for everything that was currently within the maintenance system, and then we would establish new procedures. The overall desired goal, the outcome, was to increase efficiency of maintenance processes while improving customer communications, customer relations. The objectives that were established were to account for works in process, reduce the friction between the equipment owners and the maintenance personnel, eliminate unnecessary equipment coming into the repair facility, those unnecessary induction requirements. There's a lot of equipment that just wasn't even necessary to facilitate repairs, and it ultimately wasted the equipment owner's time with bringing all that over, inventorying it while it was inducted into the maintenance process, and it wasted a lot of my maintenance personnel's time with accounting for it and on the backside when we were giving the equipment back to the equipment owners. And then overall, with that, organize our resources. The general approach was during the 1 week maintenance freeze, the section managers would systematically lay out all the works in process and compare it against the automated information system, the database that we use to track all equipment and the maintenance of that equipment. At that same time, the shipping and receiving section was going to be reduced in its size by personnel and equipment with pre-selected resources. So this was conducted in approximately 2 phases. The first phase was the preparation phase before that 1 week maintenance freeze. All leads were to generate the reports that were necessary from that automated information system in order to account for the works in process. The other lead was to determine which personnel were to be reassigned back to the sections, while the other equipment redistribution lead was to determine which equipment was going to be reallocated and where. The supply lead was to requisition the shelving during that time, and then my job during that time as the project lead was to distribute the notice that the repair facility was going to go into a freeze, so to work that customer relationship piece with the equipment owner to ensure that they were aware of what we were about to undergo. So the second phase was during that maintenance freeze was the execution phase. This is where the managers of each section were to lay out and account for all works in process. The personnel was supposed to start moving back. The equipment was all moved at the same time but had to be documented and transferred appropriately. And during that execution phase, they were to report all discrepancies and milestone accomplishments as it went. And then my job was to finalize the new inductance policies and procedures and to publish those to the equipment owners. That way we could have a smooth transition into the new process. There was no budget estimation with this project other than requisitioning the shelving, which we ultimately ended up getting for free from another facility within the organization that wasn't using the shelves, so we were able to obtain those and use those for our reorganization. The scheduling. With the scheduling, there was 2 primary phases. In this, we hadn't identified any critical paths or slack rules. Ultimately, what that would have looked like was in that preparation phase, everything was kind of critical but had the same time requirements to it. And so none of those would have had any slack to them, but they would have all been critical prior to the execution phase because they were all necessary in order to execute the next portion. At that same time, all of those phases or all of those tasks within that second phase started at the same time and weren't interdependent on each other, and you had the 1 week to accomplish them all. So again, there were no critical paths or slack rules identified within that. It would have looked somewhat like an hourglass on its side or an infinity sign where everything was on one, it all merged in the middle and then split back out until the project completion. So in our project monitoring, we actually did have some requirements where the first phase, it was to require reporting of the milestones accomplished. So once they had all the reports and personnel reassignments ready to go, they were to report up to myself that, hey, we're ready for this to happen during the next phase of the project. That second phase had daily reporting requirements in order to maintain progress and to ensure that we were going to accomplish it within the 1 week freeze, or if we were going to have to request some more time to prevent from running over, and we would have had to have made all the equipment owners as well as hire aware of what we were needed to facilitate that. The control of this project was actually a post-control, where we reported the milestones reached, and then any issues that came up while the project was underway were to be brought up, and that way they could either be handled or and documented as necessary. At the end of the project, what I required all of the managers and leads to do was to report to me what went well with the project and what could have gone better. That way we had a better understanding for the next time. For the project auditing, there was no evaluation done as a part of this project to determine whether it was complete or not. However, the maintenance process for the Marine Corps goes under a biannual inspection, in which there's a team that comes in and does an inspection to ensure that everything's going in accordance with the regulations, and they'll also make recommendations for improvements. Well, what I look forward to doing is taking the report from before this project and comparing it to after the project to see if they have recommendations, or if they feel that this new process is actually smoother. And so far, I feel that it will be that. So for the project termination, it was termination by extinction, whereas the project was complete, and so everything was wrapped up and completed. We did deliver a summary to our hire as to what was successfully accomplished throughout the project. However, we didn't actually perform a final report, and that final report is something that's common in the Marine Corps to do. It's called an after-action report, whereas all those lessons learned, the things that we identified that could have been done better and what went well for us, would go into a report and get reported to hire, or at least saved within the local section. That way, if we went to do something like this again, we could look back and learn from those lessons that had already been gone through. The fact that we didn't do that was something we should have done, and it's a loss of post-control information, something worth keeping in the future. So, in summary, the policy issues were removed that required the customers to bring every piece of equipment, and if they didn't have that, we had to turn them away. We revised that policy and made it to where as long as they had the equipment on hand and present that we needed in order to facilitate repair of the item, we would induct that into the repair section. This improved customer relations a lot with not telling them, I'm sorry, you're missing this component that I don't even need, and turning them away. Also, with eliminating the shipping and receiving section, which used to be the point of contact for customers to come, they would induct the piece of equipment with the S&R section, and then the S&R section would turn around and give that to the repair section. This sometimes created a lot of friction between the equipment owners and the maintainers, because the maintainers would need something else or have questions that weren't asked of the customer while they were on hand. With the reduction of the shipping and receiving section, the customers now induct their equipment directly to the repair section responsible for facilitating maintenance, and therefore they get a direct contact, and they also develop a liaison to where when they have questions, concerns, they have a point of contact for personnel that are directly involved with their equipment. And actually, we just determined that we could reduce the S&R section even further. We didn't want to cut them down too much and not leave them with enough personnel to care for the test measurement and the tools that are organic to our facility. But in the long run, we determined just recently that there's been more than enough to accomplish what needs to be accomplished. And so we're looking at probably cutting those numbers in half again, and that will free up more personnel to go back to the repair sections and facilitate repairs. Thank you, class. It's been a great time, and best of luck to everyone as they move forward in their degree. Thank you.